I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you so much for joining the Small Business Banking Network's first webinar of 2014, The Business Case for Financing Women-Owned SMEs, Insights on Success. We're very pleased to host this webinar in partnership with the IFC's Women Finance Hub. I'm Jessica Alfaro, the Manager of Membership and Partnerships here at SBBN. We are a network for financial institutions scaling finance to small businesses, and we are delighted to have many of our 59 members joining us here today. Thanks to our collaboration with IFC, we would also like to welcome many industry stakeholders as well. We look forward to continuing to connect and work with you in the future. I'd now like to introduce Minerva Cote of IFC, who'd like to say a few words as well. Minerva?
Thank you, Jessica. IFC's Women's Finance Hub is part of the SME Finance Forum, and we are pleased to collaborate with SBBN on this webinar. At IFC, we engaged a strong team of experts to work on this training, and members of the team included Matt Gamsa, Andrew McCartney, Montserrat Ganuza, Anusha Khan, Heather Kipnis, and myself, Minerva Cote. We hope to collaborate more with SBBN in the future and hope you enjoy this training. Thank you.
I would now like to introduce our very experienced presenters. First, we have Andrew McCartney, who is a global banking specialist with IFC's Access to Finance Advisory Services team, with over 20 years experience in banking and development in emerging markets. He is currently responsible for advising IFC's clients on how to build capacity to reach out to the SME and women's market segments. Our second presenter from IFC is Minerva Cote, a finance specialist at the IFC who leads the operations for the Women's Finance Hub. She has over 16 years of experience in the financial sector, including leasing, SME finance, capital markets, and institutional capacity building. We also have Montserrat Ganuza, who is a Banking on Women officer in IFC's Financial Markets Department, a role she assumed in May 2011, focusing on promoting financial inclusion for women. Prior to this position, and since September 2005, Montserrat was the Trade Operations Supervisor for the Global Trade Finance Program, where she managed and supervised IFC's Trade Operations team and led relationship management with the Trade Operations and International Regional Banks. And now I'd like to turn it over to Andrew to begin the presentation.
Thanks very much, Jessica. Andrew McCartney here. Great to be with you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are on the planet. First of all, I'd like to just share with you what we're wanting to cover today. First of all, starting off talking a little bit about the scale and the nature of the women in business opportunity globally. Then really talking a little bit about how banks need to position themselves if they want to capture that opportunity, and also some of the challenges that are along the way as they move on that journey. And then I think we'd like to share with you some case studies from around the world in both developed and developing countries in terms of those banks, some of whom I think you're probably familiar with, that have made it work, and what some of the potential lessons learned can be from those. And finally, as the thought leader in this space globally, we'd like to take you through IFC's approach, how we support our banks in our portfolio, develop winning propositions with this segment or subsegment. So perhaps just starting off, I guess the purpose of today really is to introduce participants to the components of the business case. That's the title today. So what are we talking about when we talk about business case? Well, IFC fundamentally views the women's segment, not as many do, as an addition to corporate social responsibility, the right thing to do, but actually as a valid business opportunity in its own right. And we believe that is the only way in which you're going to create something that is sustainable and profitable long term that will survive the test of time. I mean, what we find in terms of definition is there is no single definition out there today in terms of what is a women-owned enterprise or a women SME, as some will call. We at IFC have a standard definition, which you see there, based around ownership and, to a degree, senior management responsibility around, either the CEO or COO being involved in the business. I think, given that in a lot of markets, women are heavily in the informal sector, clearly there has to be a degree of pragmatism when defining what is a women-owned business in your given market. And certainly in the 20-odd projects we've done around the world, I think there is no single definition coming out. I think it's also worth talking at this point, whilst we're talking about women-owned SMEs, I think if we're looking at the business case for the women, we need to think maybe slightly more broadly in terms of looking at the opportunity to explore not just the SME segment for women, but other areas too, around retail banking, high net worth, the mass, also further upscale in terms of medium and commercial banking. So I think often what we find is when banks start to think wider about gender and the women opportunity across all their different strategic subsegments in the bank, all of a sudden the business case looks an awful lot stronger. So let's talk a little bit about the opportunity and the scale. I mean, one of the things we often hear about this area of the market is, well, we're interested in targeting women as a niche. Well, as you can see on the left-hand side there, there's up to 10 million formal women-owned enterprises in emerging markets today, and a large chunk of those remain fairly underfinanced and underserved. This is not a little niche that you might be thinking about exploring. This is up to 40% of your SMEs in your marketplace today. I think what's also important is that nearly 30% of those women-owned enterprises see access to finance as one of, if not the biggest, one of the biggest barriers to growth today. So I guess the message here is a major opportunity, not a little niche, nor is it just about corporate social responsibility at the outset. A little bit more around what some of our analysis has shown based on some work we've done over the last few years in the SME space. The largest opportunities, or the largest credit gap, if you like, is in East Asia and Latin America, as you can see on the left-hand side there. And I think the other important thing with this slide to show is that often the opportunity tends towards the smaller end of the market. The small SMEs, the very small, the micro, and the informal. And clearly this has big implications in terms of banks that need to downscale to actually attract this segment. We had a client recently who initially got interested with the women's segment in their corporate banking space. But when we completed the research, it showed that actually, given the nature of women-owned enterprises in this particular market, it was not a corporate play at all. It was actually much more orientated towards a retail and mass proposition. And so we had to reposition it accordingly. But I think that's an important point in terms of the type of skills, the type of capabilities you need to reach out to these women-owned enterprises. I think another slide showing some of the data we've got across the different regions, but again showing that sub-Saharan Africa this time and East Asia have the highest levels of and underserved today. But I don't intend dwelling on. We have an entire report on this on our website if people would like more detail. Certainly, when we look at our own, so what we did with 34 of our client banks globally is look to see to what degree within their SME portfolios they had strong women representation. And this just confirmed, I guess, what we already knew, was that overall, across these 34 banks, only 16% of lending was going to women-owned enterprises. I think what this study also showed was that there are big regional differences. I mean, if you look at Middle East, North Africa at 6%, South Asia at 10%, versus other parts of the world in the 20s. But overall, a very low proportion indeed. I think what this study also showed us, in no uncertain terms, was the difficulty of obtaining data and the inability really for almost all the banks to be able to report with any level of accuracy or transparency in terms of the level of SME women ownership. We actually, for the majority, had to get down to individual customer files themselves to get any real answers. So why target women? Something we get asked all the time. So as bankers, why would we want to target women? Either women in business, women's markets, when we're looking at across multiple sub-segments. Well, without going into all the different bullets I have here, I think one of the first ones is around it really can provide a driver for growth and differentiation. And what we often find is it's often in the more competitive markets that we see banks first starting to get much more robust propositions looking at and targeting women. So it's a source of differentiation. It can often be, I think another important point is often it needs to build on strength in SME banking more broadly. To win at women-owned enterprises, you also need really to be good at SME. You can't have massive gaps in your platform there without having some fundamental stumbling blocks on your journey towards the women entrepreneurs. I think another important point is women actually behave differently compared with their male counterparts. I think this is an important point. It's not so much about discrimination. It's about this is a customer that behaves in terms of how they consume financial services in a different way. And this manifests itself really across the whole banking relationship you have. So it's often harder to get a women-owned enterprise as a customer, but once you've got their loyalty, they are generally, what we see is they have much stronger retention rates. They can also have much higher cross-sell and product penetration rates. Again, another area in terms of when you're looking at customer profitability is it's often less, what we find is less about the lending piece, it's much more around the savings piece. Women tend to have a much stronger savings propensity compared with their male, and it's often longer term, so it's much more sticky. Overall, there's generally a net funding surplus coming from the women, both on the retail side and also as entrepreneurs. But I think another area that's often put forward is around risk behavior. There is no doubt that women have a lower risk tolerance. We find this in most markets, not all. Generally, the only time we see risk behavior not in line with that is where there may be a degree of male, what we call male pollution, in terms of the uptake of credit. So in other words, the husband is actually wanting the credit. It's the woman that's fronting the loan. This is where we see NPLs shoot through the roof in several markets. But overall, generally, we often find lower default rates, like for like, compared with their male counterparts, but not always. That is not a universal finding, but is a common finding. I think the last point on the business case side really is the link to family wallet. In almost every market, including some of the more conservative Muslim nations around the world, it is clear that the person the woman in the family will often dominate over 80% of the financial decisions of that family. And by actually having the business relationship with that woman, chances are you are also going to take the majority of the family wallet, including the husband's business, along with potentially relatives as well, both on any business and also personal financial services side. So a lot of reasons to be thinking about when it comes to the business case. But so I guess the next section is, well, that's great, Andrew, but, well, what do we need to do to really capture that opportunity? Well, I think, the first thing to think about is, obviously, ultimately, all SMEs in almost every market around the world face a range of challenges, whether you're in the UK, you're US, or you're talking Africa, Asia. SMEs overall face a number of challenges towards the growth. The reality is that women face even more. They're even more disadvantaged compared with their male compadres. And these barriers are of a variety, ranging from access to finance, discriminatory legal, access to skills, often in terms of things like financial literacy, women are disadvantaged, and so on and so forth, and also social and cultural norms and values. And so it's not just about access to finance, and I think this is an important point. When capturing this opportunity, the bank needs to think more broadly beyond just financial services and access to finance, to think, well, how can we as a bank position ourselves in the middle of all these barriers to help women overcome at least some of them, so that they can actually run a sustainable and profitable business. And I think this is a crucial point, and it moves you away from a purely product push perspective in terms of, right, let's get the product guys in to develop a pink credit card for women, to start thinking much deeper about, well, what are the barriers, what are the needs of this subsegment, and how can we as a bank facilitate overcoming some of these. And this is also, there was a SBBN survey recently, as we understand, of 21 of you out there. I'm sure many of you are in the crowd tonight as we speak. But it's clear that you are already aware of many of these challenges that you see women entrepreneurs facing, whether it be in terms of lack of collateral, the social and cultural, at 76% of you saying that, access to finance, financial literacy. So you're already aware of these barriers. So where do you need to develop the strength to actually capture the opportunity then? Well, there are 6 main, in our experience, now having worked with about 22 banks in this space, there are 6 key areas. One is around the data, the quality of data, and the ability to flag and identify women both in ownership structure and account structure. And this sounds obvious, but this is often a very painful exercise indeed. The second area that often many scrimp on is the market research and knowledge, the insight about what is actually making this segment tick. So whether it be behavioral, whether it be focus groups, whether it be life cycle based, there's all sorts of things that a bank needs to do in this space to really understand what is going on and what some of these challenges and opportunities are in this segment. And related to that is a need to provide non-financial advisory services. So things like education, information, the opportunity to network, provide workspaces. These are all non-financial services that a bank can provide on a sustainable basis, not on a charity basis, on a sustainable basis, that can all add to the overall proposition you are providing to the women in your market. Another key one is around the branding and communications. Many of the successful banks have managed to develop distinct brands and platforms that appeal to women, whilst at the same time not alienating the men. So it's including women, not excluding the men. Another important one is really around what we call the internal alignment. There's no point in professing to be the champion for women's markets in your market if you have no women in senior management and you only have 10% of your staff as women, because you're not practicing what you preach. And women as customers will see through that. So there's often a whole load of work and a journey that often has to be followed in this area to be successful. And the last one is around sort of the products and campaign side, what we call insight-driven campaigns. We do not see the business case being grabbed by those banks that focus purely on product. However, there can be a degree of product innovation that can be useful, particularly where there are certain barriers. So, for example, with collateral, perhaps collateral is a major problem for women entrepreneurs in your market. They don't have much. Well, there are ways in which you can innovate your product programs to actually get around that. For example, jewelry-based loans, unsecured loans, guarantees, etc. So, in a nutshell then, 6 main areas where, as a bank, you can focus and refine your business model to actually capture this opportunity. Jessica, do you want to ask the question?
Great. Thank you so much. I think you provided us some really good information here. And now's the time we'd like to pose a question for our participants. So please let us know what have been some successful or challenging experiences in your markets with banking to women in business. So please chime in using the chat box or the question box. We'd like to hear some examples from your experience. And we'll give folks just about a minute here to provide some examples. So Andrew, I think in terms of some of the successes that we've seen, it's been in some of the areas that you've mentioned. So providing some of the non-financial services has helped in terms of networking, mentoring opportunities. One of our members is talking about partnering as well with capacity organizations, and then we've got a couple institutions that have been working on doing some branding for women and some distinct products for women as well. So we've seen some successes in that area. And some of the challenges have been more around, almost everyone is saying, surrounding finding the best women entrepreneurs. So I think that's probably something that you've seen in your work with financial institutions as well.
Absolutely.
And we've got a couple more. Go ahead.
Go on.
We've also seen some issues in terms of collateral availability for women. And I think what you mentioned too is finding good data for women as well. Okay, so I think that those are some of the main areas that we've seen. So thanks everyone for participating.
Well, if I could just quickly respond to some of them. I think, when we talk about things like the networking and some of the non-financial services, I think, one of the key things to think about when it comes to the non-financial services, the networking particularly, is how you scale that up. Because, if you're going to actually to make this a profitable business, you need scale. And I think one of the biggest challenges with non-financial services is how to develop a scale.
Andrew, your last bit just cut out there, but I think you were mentioning scaling is very important. So thank you for that. And we just got in another comment that women have been a very good credit risk for this institution, but that their challenge has been that women
enhance your proposition.
Okay, Andrew, you're coming back in now. Sorry, could you repeat the last bit?
Yeah, no, just in terms of the partnering, just saying that, I think it's an important part is you don't necessarily want to be doing it all yourself, and that there are often a number of providers locally and globally also that can provide a very valuable part of your value proposition if you team up. And it's also a way of crowding out your competition with Me Too type propositions. So that's a little bit on that.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
So Montserrat, do you want to talk us through some of the case studies?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. I'm going to speak about banks, successful banks that have already seen the opportunity, the business opportunity on the women's market, and that are actually targeting it, this subsegment already very successfully. We have on the screen Royal Bank of Canada, Wells Fargo, RBS, and Westpac, and they have different models, so to speak. Royal Bank of Scotland actually is one of the pioneers and provides basically advice on a strategy for women-owned businesses, also networking opportunities, as well as they provide sort of like a calendar of events that helps women to network. But also they have something that is actually used a lot by other banks as well, which is sort of like creating awards, like the Women Entrepreneur of the Year and so forth. So actually Royal Bank of Canada, since they provided this value proposition for women, they have increased their SME market share from 18 to 22% in 4 years. Wells Fargo also have sort of like a specific value proposition for women, but this is more built into whatever they have already in the SME segment, and what they have done is created like different sections. For instance, they have a section for African American women entrepreneurs, Hispanic women entrepreneurs, Asian, etc. And they try to have a sort of like a specific way of reaching out to these sub-segments, no? And they have also been very successful, and since 1995 they have provided 700,000 loans to women-owned small businesses. Also the last two, RBS and Westpac, that I'm going to talk about in more detail in the next 2 slides, they have also been very successful. RBS particularly, they saw the opportunity back in 2008 based on market research they did, and they actually continue doing. But they saw that the growth rate of the women-owned businesses is much higher than the men ones. For instance, in 2008, the growth rate was 9% versus 1% for male-led businesses. So they put together a business proposition that I'm going to describe now. And in the last 12 months, they saw an increase of the business banking account by 27%. No? And then the last one, Westpac, also I will talk about it in the next slide. And they are very successful actually, and they have increased their revenue by $462 million. Focusing on Westpac, basically the model that Westpac uses is very holistic, and they basically see everything through a women lens. and is embedded into all the 16 segments, meaning that it's not really an individual segment per se or strategic segment per se, but it's also embedded in everything, in all the business segments and delivery models and products that Westpac has in place. They actually have a very strong market research section, and what they try to do with this market research is focusing on financial management behaviors by women. And they use all the outcomes of this market research on the financial behaviors to drive the campaigns and the product uptake. In terms of the customer management, they emphasize a banking relationship management model because it's proven in their market research that actually women respond better to a one-to-one relationship. So they basically, women don't really care that much that they have in front of them a female relationship manager, but that the relationship manager that they have in front of them treats them with respect, etc. No? So in terms of whether they have different products for women, they don't actually. It's more the delivery, it's more the communicating of the products that they have. What they really have is a distinct brand for women. This is called the Ruby Connection, and is basically supported by an online platform that you can check yourself if you want to. Is Ruby Connection, and everybody can become a member independently of whether it's men or women. And this sub-brand called Ruby focuses on all the activities that are related to women, in terms of like organizing seminars, organizing networking opportunities, events, providing blogs and information dissemination. No? And this brand, this Ruby Connection, actually enables the Westpac to reach out to women and also bring awareness about the different products and programs that Westpac offers. So the next section is the targeted communications. That is not only through the Ruby Connection platform, but also through all the social media you can think of, Twitter, Facebook, etc. And they also promote networking and exchanges of information among the women clients. No? Another very important part is the what we have been talking about, actually Andrew has been talking about, is providing non-financial services. And what they do is they sort of like use also a satellite type of platform called the Davison Institute. And what this institute provides is capacity building and training, networking opportunities, as well as information dissemination. And the important thing about this institute is that they don't have sort of like special courses for women. What they do is also work on the different type of delivery channels, because women tend to be more time poor than men. So they try to facilitate online courses, etc. So now the next case study is Royal Bank of Scotland, which also saw the opportunity, as I mentioned before, in 2008, when they conducted the market research and saw the growth rate of women-led businesses. And this bank is has a vision of becoming the bank where women choose to work, women choose to bank, and people choose to invest. So this is basically the general vision of the bank. And similar to Westpac, the women's market for Royal Bank of Scotland is embedded in the business structure of the bank, but it's very specific to the business section, meaning that it's not really a holistic approach like Westpac. No? This is basically for SME, women-owned businesses. But it has also a very strong internal alignment, and basically they try to sort of like nurture the employees so that they can unlock their potential. And also something that is very distinct to the model of this bank is that they have relationship managers that are very specific to deliver the women in business proposition. And also RBS, they don't have product customization. So this seems to be sort of like a common feature. But what they have as well is the non-financial services in a very also different way from Westpac. And this is actually RBS what does is partnering with leading industry organizations such as We Connect International, Every Woman, An Inspirational Journey. So organizations that actually provide support and advice to women business owners. No? So this is very much in line with what Andrew and some of the participants have mentioned in their questions, that you don't really have to reinvent the wheel internally. No, you can actually outsource and partner with other institutions. The Royal Bank of Scotland has basically based its model on that. Also, it's very important for RBS, the sales and marketing. And as I mentioned before, they have sort of like trained 180 relationship managers who have actually who have done an accreditation program to understand women's behaviors and motivations. So basically these RMs have an excellent understanding of the market dynamics, but also the buying behaviors of the customers, especially of the different buying behaviors of the women, no? Whether they take longer to make financial decisions and so forth. But also they are very connected to the community. They are very connected to the existing alliances in their local communities, and so they are able to put together events and networking opportunities, no? For existing clients, but also for non-existing clients. No? So these will be the two models that we have really studied in detail. And now Andrew is going to talk about a bank in Lebanon, BLC, which is actually an IFC client partner. So thank you, Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Montserrat. Yes, now BLC Bank in Lebanon, this was a project that we worked with the bank on from about two years or so ago. Just very quickly, clear, as I said before, starting off with the market research, and then developing with the bank a range of things, from training of their staff around the sales training side, the development of a value proposition specific for women entrepreneurs, and that included a product package that had two specific new product innovations, one around a collateral-free loan and the other around a specific savings program that got around some of the legal hurdles in that market when it came to children's accounts. As well as that was a strong focus around the non-financial advisory, the launching of the We initiative, which you can see in the bottom right, and strongly encourage you to view that after the show, so to speak. On that also now we have the IFC's SME toolkit, so that women and men for that matter can access training materials related to their business. As well as that, it was a Women Entrepreneur of the Year award program to encourage and recognize women in the market, and other areas too. So for example, financial education forums for financial literacy, an advisors network, so a tie-up with a range of external advisors that can provide support to the women-owned enterprises. So, and this has already proven over the last couple of years to be very successful. It has now been extended to women's markets more broadly. So if you like, the Women Entrepreneur was phase one, but now they're moving to have moved to a broader women market proposition across all their businesses. Jessica.
Actually, I think in terms of time, let's move this question to the end, and then that can open up some discussion for us as well. So, Minerva, if we just want to move right ahead into your section.
Yes, thanks, Jessica. Next slide. IFC provides a unique range of investment and advisory services we offer to financial institutions to enable them participate profitably in the women's market. For each country, our services range from, we could do a comprehensive gender market research through staff training, and then provide a range of investment services which include risk-sharing facilities, loan facilities, and credit lines. For each client, we usually start with a thorough gender diagnostic to assess, the strengths of the bank and areas that we could improve on. Based on that, we work with the bank's management and staff to develop a unique strategy and approach that meets the needs of the bank and its market. We also complement, next slide, we complement our range of services with resources and products, unique resources and products, most of which we use exclusively for our clients. So these will include a customer management best practice guide that will guide you on how to better serve the SME market. And also we have a comprehensive SME banking training that we can tailor to meet the needs of the bank. We also developed a Strengthening Access to Finance report in collaboration with the G20, which assesses trends, challenges, and opportunities in the women's entrepreneurship finance market. And this report is actually available at the Women's Finance Hub. This is one of the few reports that we have that are available to the public, and we'll encourage you to visit the Women's Finance Hub, www.womensfinancehub.org, to view this report. It gives a good overview. Currently, IFC has a gender portfolio of over $600 million, partnering with more than 20 financial institutions across the globe. These include Guarantee Bank in Turkey, Bank of Dayang in China, Access Bank Nigeria, and Itaú Unibanco in Brazil. And for Itaú, we actually have details of our intervention with them, the investment component and advisory components at the end of these slides. In April last year, IFC launched a Women's Finance Hub in partnership with the G20 as part of our efforts to serve the women's entrepreneurship market. The hub aimed to share knowledge and promote best practices in access to finance for women-owned SMEs. The hub is an integral part of the SME Finance Forum, and we offer a range of on and offline activities. These include a comprehensive knowledge platform with lots of resources on women's entrepreneurship finance. We saw in one of the questions data and information. The hub is very comprehensive. We have a list of reports and we're continuously updating it. So again, we encourage you to visit the hub. We also manage an active LinkedIn discussion group, SME Finance Forum, where a lot of financial institutions and stakeholders discuss various issues in women's entrepreneurship finance. So again, we'll encourage you to visit our SME, join our LinkedIn group and connect with your peers and share your experiences, ask questions. It's a very active group. We also convene events in partnership. An example is what we're doing with SBBN now. And we've recently just launched Financing Women Entrepreneurs for Growth seminar series with USAID, and we do this every other month, and we'll encourage you to join. It's also available on the web. So as I mentioned, we have details of two of our deals in IFC, Itaú Unibanco and Access Bank Nigeria, the risk sharing facility with Coca-Cola Access Bank for the Coca-Cola distributors. We encourage you to look at the slides. We've provided all the details, and the Itaú Bank deal as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will hand over to Jessica now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to each of our presenters. We appreciate it so much, and thanks for all the great information. We'd now like to open it up for questions from our participants. So we've had a couple questions come in, and so if you do have some questions or some thoughts, we would love to hear from you. And something that we could have the participants go back to is, how can these best practice models be replicated in your own market? So if we have some participants that have been successful and would like to share based on that, that would be wonderful, and we'll also open it up to general questions as well. So we'll give folks a few minutes to post questions into the chat box or question box. And we did have one question that came in from one of our member banks. So we have a financial institution that currently has a loyalty card for female retail clients, but they're looking to expand this product or products specifically from the retail market to customers to female businesses in the SME market. So Andrew, would you like to take a crack at that question?
Okay. Yes. Often the credit card as a form of relative low value and unsecured way of accessing the women small entrepreneurs can be a very effective strategy. I think in terms of the requirements of retail versus an entrepreneur in terms of the card itself and how the card is used, it can be quite different. I think all too often a loyalty card around the retail may be based around obviously personal consumption and of particular types of consumption and shopping. But when it comes to the women entrepreneur, especially at the smaller end of the entrepreneurship, they may well be using this card more as an unsecured loan than necessarily a consumption card, if you like. So I think they are, if you've got strength in cards, it can for certain be leveraged for women entrepreneurs, and you can obviously carry the branding across if it's effective. But in terms of how it's used, it can be very, very different.
Great. I think it was specifically a debit card as well. So I think you're spot on in terms of looking at how what they're going to be using it for would necessarily change from the more kind of consumer and consumption items to actually using it as some unsecured credit opportunities as well. So Andrew, I had another question for you. You talked a little bit about that institutions need to have sort of their SME pieces in place before they can expand in terms of really focusing on women specifically. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, yes. Often when we are working with clients, we have to plug some gaps in their SME platform. So, for example, I gave you the example of collateral-free loans. Well, clearly, you would not be going down a collateral-free loan route if your risk management capabilities and your risk management platform was not robust enough to handle that type of product development. So But I think other areas really are around things like the data, the segmentation. Often we'll come in and we'll have a client absolutely enthralled with the women entrepreneur opportunity, but actually when you look at how they're segmenting their SMEs today more broadly, it leaves a lot of room for improvement. And until you get the basic, what I'd call strategic segmentation right, all you're doing, bringing the women piece in, is adding further confusion, if you like. So I think it's often in a range of areas. But I think the other important aspect when and ultimately we're talking about the business case, is that many of the capabilities you need, like say for example non-financial services, to do women in business well, you also need for your male side of the business also. So really it's about leveraging that investment. So it's something that may be required across your broader SME platform, but can be particularly leveraged for women.
Right. Great. Thank you. In terms of institutions really wanting to now focus, let's say they have the SME segment sort of figured out, if they want to start focusing on women entrepreneurs, what's really the first step for them? I know you talked about the 6 areas, so maybe you could tell us what's the first step in terms of focusing and increasing the number of women entrepreneurs that they serve.
I would say two things that kind of need to take place in parallel. One is to develop insights. I mean, often in many markets there is very little data out there, and that just adds to some of the myths that we see when it comes to target. So the first thing is to develop some insights from your own data about what sort of baseline do you have today. What do we know about our women customers in the bank, whether it be retail, whether it be on the business side. And I think start looking at some of the figures. But as well as that is, nothing's going to happen. I mean, even if you identify the opportunity, you've got a big market, no one's targeting it today, big opportunity to innovate in this space, you've got to get top management involved and early. Because without, and I think this is probably the #1 thing, without a sponsor at the top, nothing's going to happen. At best, it's going to be viewed as an extension of corporate social responsibility, a bit of a hobby farm on the side of the balance sheet, as we call it. But you're never going to get a winning proposition that is going to be sustainable and profitable and taken seriously in the market. So I think that's I think those are the 2 points: research and buy-in and awareness. 3 points, well, 2 points really.
Great, thank you very much. That's something that we actually highlighted recently on our forums as well. We had interviewed Guarantee Bank, and Selena Oz. That was one of the #1 things that she had mentioned, was really getting that buy-in, not only at the senior management level, but at all levels as well. So even along the SME loan officers, so they're the ones that are out there, working and looking for women entrepreneurs. So very, very important to get that buy-in. So thank you very much.
If I could, sorry, just add to staying on Guarantee, because I know Guarantee obviously they may be on the line now. I don't know, but we've recently done a case study with them where we deep dived into Guarantee's Women in Business model. We should be launching it with the bank in the next few weeks. So for those that are interested, please contact us or through SBBN. We can send a copy, but that will give you a lot of detail around really the dynamics of the business model, and also some of the key components of the business case which we've been talking about today.
Great. Thank you. And we're still taking questions for about 5 more minutes, and it looks like we're starting to get some more information about some of the successes. And so one of our financial institutions that's on the line today has focused on the financial empowerment section, so actually doing some education specifically for their women entrepreneurs. So maybe, Andrew, you could talk to us a little bit more about that and how that plays an important role with women entrepreneurs.
Well, I think, ultimately to be the champion for women and women empowerment in a given market, as we were talking about before, there are a range of barriers that need to be overcome. And this is where things like the training come in. And as we also talked about, you don't have to do it all yourself. There are lots of people, whether it be government departments, NGOs, universities, other IFIs, that are also interested in supporting women empowerment. And so it's about, we call it developing the ecosystem. It's a way in which you can tap into all these different entities that are involved in women empowerment in your market, whether it be a women's business forum, a women's association, to make it happen. And that can range from providing like a mini MBA, or working in conjunction with a foundation like a Goldman Sachs or Cherry Blair Foundation that offer these type of services, through to providing your own business club for women, where you may have peer-to-peer mentoring, and overseas trips, loyalty programs, and such like. I think the key point is always to think about is around sustainability also. So yes, fine, we do this seminar program, or we do this mini MBA, but if we can't show that this is supporting the bottom line, sooner or later it is going to die. And when you look at the successful cases like your Westpacs of this world, they've come a long journey. I mean, Westpac's been on the journey for nearly 18, 19 years now with women's markets, and they fell into a lot of those traps in terms of providing a lot of these services for free without necessarily demonstrating enough value to the bottom line. So I think that's the big challenge.
Right. Yeah, I think what you're talking about is very helpful, both in terms of the possibility of creating some programming within the institution, and then also with building some strategic alliances or partnering. And we actually have another question about that in terms of implementation with other partners. So one of our financial institutions is specifically asking about partnering with a mobile operator, for example. Might this be a way to achieve success in targeting and increasing services to women entrepreneurs?
I think the mobile side is a fascinating one, and you see examples now in Nigeria. I don't know where that question has come from, but you see it in Nigeria, you see it in Kenya, where the mobile phone is actually getting to a lot of these underserved areas, and not just in terms of financial services, but also the provision of education and information. As well as that, I mean, clearly, the other way of looking at it is also in terms of things like agent banking, and there's a lot of possibilities there where you can specifically develop a business model with the use of agents with a strong focus on women, and by doing so, actually reach out to more women entrepreneurs as agents in their own right. So I think it offers, I know that there's been some very good reports, for example, from players like the Cherry Blair Foundation in this space related to example in Nigeria, and I'd strongly recommend you take a look there. But certainly it's at the frontier right now, and I think it has enormous potential, not just for micro, but also for SME women entrepreneurs.
Great. Very helpful. And we've talked a lot about successes and ways to become successful, steps that lead to success, but we do have a question in terms of if there's any cases of institutions that have failed while targeting entrepreneurs, and looking at what was their main mistake, and maybe we could look at some ways and end on how we could avoid some of those mistakes as well.
Do you want me to tackle this one again, or should...
Montserrat, I don't know. Do you want to chat about that since you brought up the business cases?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I think that I mean, there is no one bank that has failed in the sense that when you put together a value proposition that takes into account all the different particularities of your market ecosystem, and as well as you use the market insights and the market research, I think that there is no way really to fail, because it's a natural subsegment of the SME. I think that the only example that we can talk about is one of an institution that I think started very strongly, and then sort of like didn't really went on the different steps that need to be taken, in the sense that it started more as a sort of like a marketing or sort of like tool or publicity stunt, and I think that sort of like staying that on that side. No, it didn't really go beyond being a corporate social responsibility, I think, sort of like program. No, so I think that the only way to failure is if you really don't take it as a business segment. If you really take it as a corporate social responsibility one, I think that of course you will not see the results, no? You will not see the benefits that brings to any financial institution. So that's the only way that I would say you can fail. Once you really take a look at the segment as a business one, I think that there is no way to fail, because it really is a natural segment within the SME. So if you don't really pay attention to it, you are really missing on a very sort of like sizable market share, and so there is not really a way to fail, I think. If you really put if you really take into account all the different aspects that Andrew was talking about, no, you really have to know what you have in your portfolio. You really have to have the capability of mining the data. You really have to be able to train the people in your delivery channels in order to be able to talk to the women entrepreneurs. I think that if you take into account the different aspects of it, I don't really see the way to fail, but I may be a little bit too passionate. Andrew, if you can say... Yeah,
I mean, I think you've touched on it. I mean, I think the classic mistake is the corporate social responsibility mistake, where it gets lots of noise internally and externally. Everyone's doing the right thing, but fundamentally it's viewed as a marginal play. So I think that's the first mistake. I think the second mistake we often see is banks want to be first to market. So the CEO wakes up one day and goes, I want to target women entrepreneurs or women's markets. And then the order comes down from on high, down into the field troops to say, look, we need a proposition for women, and we need it like yesterday. And I think what we often have to sometimes almost put water on the fire a little bit to actually have so that clients spend a little more time researching and actually thinking about what they really need. Because the danger that we've seen and has materialized, the risk is that the rhetoric that the CEO is then extolling to the market is not matched with reality. And you get this mismatch where the women entrepreneur comes into the branch but gets the same level of rubbishy service she's always had. And I think that totally undermines the credibility of the women proposition. I think the other two areas are really around lots of good stuff going on in head office, but no fundamental change to the front line. And I think this is also a very important point, is that not only do you need ownership at the top and in management, but you also need a degree of advocacy and representation in your networks themselves. So like we saw with Westpac, with specific ambassadors and champions within the businesses and also out in the branches themselves. Every Westpac branch has a Ruby champion. Each region has a Ruby ambassador. That's examples of how you can embed these type of behaviors onto the front line. And I think the last one, which is a common, and you mentioned it in the context of Guarantee Bank and Celine, is really the ownership issue and the lack of ownership quite often. And I think this can seriously derail the capturing of the opportunity from very early on. We have a number of banks right now that are seriously struggling in this space because they don't have top management buy-in.
Great. Wonderful. Well, that is very helpful, and I think hopefully some of our institutions will go away with some great examples and steps to avoid some of these mistakes that we just discussed. So this is actually the end of our webinar. I'd like to thank IFC's Women's Finance Hub so much for joining us. So thank you to Minerva, Andrew, and Montserrat, and thank you to all of our participants for joining us today as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.